Hello again and welcome to the 140k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a huge thank you to Stefan Soto for sending in some awesome pictures of his Lehman Russes. These are from the Faust Fortifiers, 208th Armoured Division, and I have to say I really like this colour scheme. It's just a classic colour scheme and it's really well done. I also like the subtle difference between the sort of backfield bombardment tanks, things like the Vanquisher and the Exterminator, which are going to be sitting back and doing a bit more long-range firepower. They, haven't got sponsons, they look a bit more stripped down, and then you've got the close up-range bruisers, who are going to be like the Punisher and Demolisher tank. They've got things like sponsons and dozer blades. It's very obvious that they're intended to be brawling in the middle of the battlefield. Really like these tanks, so thank you for sharing these with us, Stefan. If anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, please head on over to my Facebook page, or you can email them to me at mordianglorytv@gmail.com. Don't worry, the link to the Facebook page and the email address will be down in the description below. One other thing, shameless plug, if you want to support the channel further, you can consider heading on over to the Patreon page. I am really transparent with all the Patreon stuff. All the money that gets donated there gets reinvested back into the channel. I use it for things like going to tournaments now that the UK lockdown is coming to an end, or doing big projects like the upcoming new dedicated YouTube studio that I'm going to be having for doing battle reports on the channel. And yeah, like I said, all the money gets reinvested back in. Before I forget, huge thank you to all the current Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. Without you, this channel would just be a big, well, so several rude words is what it would be. It wouldn't be very good. So thank you so much. You guys are truly awesome. But without further ado, let's get into today's video. Now what I want to talk about today, guys, is a unique kind of competitive play that is actually quite common, but you don't see it talked about as much as single events. I want to talk about team tournaments. Now team tournaments are actually one of my favourite kind of events to go to, and I love the fact that we're starting to see more and more of these pop up around the competitive scene. So in a singles event, that is where you are a one-man army. It's you, and and you basically see how far you can go. And it's your list, and when you're building a singles list, it has to be able to take on everything. It has to be a take-all-comers list. In a team event, it's slightly different. You'll still be doing 1 versus 1 games, but you'll be part of a team. We're not talking about doubles here, where 2 people on each side of the table, both with 500 to 1,000 points. We're not talking about that. We're talking about teams. Now how teams tends to work, guys, is you have 4 or 5 people on your team, and when it comes to picking games, or when it comes to fighting battles, what happens is a team of 5 will put up against another team of 5 people, and then the captains of each team will take it in turns, and I'm vastly generalizing here, but they'll take it in turns. There'll be a dice off or a flip a coin to see who gets to do the first pick, but they'll take it in turns to pick which one of their lists goes up against a list on the opposite team. So for example, if you've got an orc list and you're like, I definitely know that my orc guy is really good with his orcs, and he's built his list to specifically be able to beat Space Marines, then hopefully if you win that roll off, you as a captain, you go, right, I'm going to put my orc guy versus your Space Marine guy, and you can pick advantageous situations. And then likewise in the opposite team, they might go, oh damn, we know the orc guy is actually quite good at probably taking our Space Marine guy. Okay, we'll put our Dark Elder player up against their Space Marine player, because we know that tends to be a good matchup. So it allows captains to try and pick the best matchups as much as they can against the opposing team's lists. Now what's really interesting about this is it allows people to build quite unique lists, ones that normally wouldn't do very well because they aren't take-all-comers lists, but actually are really good in a team format. And you know what's quite surprising is that Imperial Guard do a lot better in team tournaments than they do in regular singles events. And we're going to go into a few, and I've had a lot of experience with this, we're going to go into a few reasons of why that is. So one of the reasons why Guard can do really well in a team event is because your captain can do his best to try and avoid putting you up against a list on the opposite team which is just your hard counter. So for example, you may have turned up with a fairly standard hybrid Guard list with some tanks and some infantry, And your captain knows that if he puts that up against a Dark Elder player, that you're going to have a really bad time. However, if there's an Orc player on the opposite team who wants to, run some sort of green tide against you, then your captain knows, well, I know my Guard player can handle that green tide. Guard are really good at dealing with green tide or with Tyranid bug tide, stuff like that. So your team captain can put you up against a favourable matchup, allows you to avoid some of those really difficult armies for Guard to deal with. That's one way of doing it. That's if you've got a nice team captain who wants to try and give you a good time and tries to get as many wins as possible. However, one thing that Guard can do very well is, and I've been in this scenario a lot. Even when I've been captain, I put myself in this scenario. One thing that Guard can do really well is they can almost be a difficult way to put it. I don't want to say sacrificial lamb. It's kind of accurate, but it's also a bit deeper than that. So what you'll tend to find is when you're on a team, especially if it's 5 people, 4 or 5 people, you'll tend to find that there's just one list in the opposing team that you do not want anyone on your team to face. It's just really, it's the flavour of the month. It's the most powerful thing out at the moment. You just don't want to deal with it. If you try and put your best player up against that best list, what you'll find is that either your best player will lose, not ideal, or your best player who should be scoring really big in terms of points ends up only scoring a minor victory, which again is not ideal. Now bear in mind, for a lot of teammates, I should have said this at the beginning, guys, you can often only turn up with one of each faction, which means if one person turns up with Space Marines, no one else can take Space Marines in that team. Even if they're Death Watch, even if they've got their own special codex, doesn't matter. One power armor boy gets to turn up, and then everyone else will turn up with other stuff. So what you just should have mentioned that, but back to what we're talking about. So what you tend to find is you need a list, you need a team member who can be a bit of a sacrificial lamb, but who has basically built his list to play for the draw, or that no matter who they go up against, even if they lose, they're only ever going to cause a minor loss or draw, and maybe they'll even scrape a few wins out here and there. This is the kind of list, this is the kind of role that Imperial Guard can do really, really well in a teams event. One of the best that I've ever done in any tournament is, I tend to do much better in team events than I do in singles, just because of, well, not always. In 8th edition it was fine, I did loads of singles events, but especially in 9th, when tournaments are going to be taking place again, Guard are very much in a similar scenario to where they were in 7th, which was not doing very well. And so the way I'm thinking of building my tournament lists for team events is by doing this. I'm going to be almost a sacrificial lamb, and I'm going to take the hit. I'm going to take a Guard list that is designed to just get punched in the face repeatedly, but not lose. And what this will mean is that every time that someone on the opposite team has got a really dead hard list, my team captain can just be like, right, Mordian Glory, you take those guys on. Doesn't matter if just score what points you can, but the important thing is don't lose by much, and that's fine. That is actually a totally okay role, and it might seem really harsh, but it actually can be really, really invaluable. An example I've got of this is when yes, admittedly it is a couple of editions out, but it's still very relevant for especially what we're seeing in 9th edition with the sort of 2-tier system between many 8th edition codexes and 9th edition codexes. Back in 7th, you used to have something called an invisible Death Star. It was basically where you could take like 1,500 points of your list into one nigh on unkillable unit. Nigh on unkillable. Guard are really good at just bogging those things down, because I used to turn up with 300 guardsmen, and I don't really care if your unit's nigh on unkillable. If it's spending the whole game munching through a guardsman squad or 2 or 3 at a time, doesn't really matter to me. I'm going to try and score points around objectives. I'm going to try and score the secondary points and whatnot. And worst comes to most of the time, I'm going to get a draw, and you're going to end up killing loads of stuff, but I'm going to win on objectives, or I'm going to draw on objectives. So I once went to a 7th edition tournament where I faced 6 games in a row Invisible Death Stars, and I only lost one of those games, and I drew 4 of those games and actually managed to win one of them. And my team ended up placing second because of that, because my team captain, without hesitation, was literally able to go, Invisible Death Star on that enemy team, Mordian Glory, you're up. And every single time, and it was a grueling experience. Let me tell you, it was a grueling experience. But personal, sort of side tangent, it was actually really good for me as a player because it totally dispelled any fear I had of Invisible Death Stars going forward, because they were quite intimidating for many players. But for me, it was like, oh, Invisible Death Star, I call this a Tuesday. So it is a really important thing. And now the way Guard can do this is, well, you guys know it, you guys love it, I talk about this all the time, but it's pure infantry. Pure infantry are really, really good in a team scenario. The other flip side, though, I'm not going to go into too much about that, I talk about pure infantry all the time. The other way that Guard can do really well in a team event is by going the other way. And actually, armies like Scions or more elite Guard armies can do really, really well in a team event, because there are some armies out there which, just Scions do not want to go up against. But actually, especially now in 9th edition, where we're seeing a lot less Feel No Pains, we're seeing a lot less Invulnerable saves. Games Workshop, outside of Custodes, seems pretty clear that they want to limit Invulnerable saves to like a 4+. And I'm sure by the time all the 9th edition codex come out, I think even Custodes, everyone will be capped at a 4+ invuln, which is absolutely fine. But because of the things like this, Scions are starting to, every time Games Workshop releases a codex which has less Feel No Pain and less Invulnerable saves in it and just more normal durability, Scions get a shadow buff, because Scions are just really good at taking out elite armies. That's literally what they're designed to do. Even at the height of bullshit Space Marine-ness, okay? Now, I'm not saying that this was very common, but when a casual Space Marine list was able to just walk over many opponents, I was able to take my Scions and give them a bloody nose, or even beat them relatively easily, because Scions are literally the anti-Space Marine army. Every gun in their arsenal is designed to kill power armor, okay? So Scions are actually, they do have some tricky matchups that they can't deal with, but likewise, they've got some matchups that they're really, really, really good at doing. And if you're on a team event, your captain can put you up, if as much as possible, your captain can put you up against one of those armies that your Scions are actually tailor-made to kill. So just thought I'd do a quick video on team events. I think it's an often overlooked aspect of competitive gaming, but it's actually really, really fun. I highly recommend it. Allows you to build some more interesting lists, because yeah, sure, occasionally, even with your captain doing as best as possible, you're going to end up getting those shitty matchups. There's not much you can do about it. But a lot of the time, you will find that you end up, your captain, if you've got a good captain who knows what the hell he's doing, you can end up in good scenarios and good situations that your list is, tailored to deal with. And it's a bit funny because we always talk about don't list tailor. But when you go to team events, sometimes it's okay to be like, right, this army that I've put together is tailored to deal with this kind of threat, captain. Try your best to put me up against those things. Or this army is so damn just blobby and durable that just put me up against something and I'll just guarantee that I'm just going to mob them and that I'll get draws, basically. I'm just going to be the guy that you can put me up against anything and I'm going to get a draw. Literally, I'm turning up with just 400 plus models. I don't need to kill anything. I'm just going to blob. And I'm just going to get draws or mana losses all tournament. And that's absolutely fine. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Anyone out there who has also been to any team events, let me know what you think. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. And of course, I'll see you guys next time.